Hello, everyone. We are back with episode 33. And I I would like to call you a repeat offender. I'm so sorry, Jared. But
Okay,
yeah,
that's
we
fine.
are so we're so ecstatic to welcome Jared Browne. He was our speaker last year, and we can have a fascinating discussion today. Jared, would you care to say a few words about yourself to the
Uh,
people who are watching?
yeah, sure. Yeah. So thanks for bringing me back anyway for part two. Hopefully the sequel will be better than the first part, unlike what usually happens in Hollywood. Um, so basically, yeah. So I'm Jared Browne. I'm based in Ireland. I'm the head of privacy and AI governance for Fexco. We're a conglomerate of companies. We're based in about 50 countries. I'm a member of the EU AI Office General Purpose AI Working Group. So is Elena. I'm a member of the working group, the AI working group of the FPF in Washington. I'm originally a qualified lawyer. Before that, I did a degree and a master's in philosophy. I also have an LLM in privacy law, and I work with a body called SEDPO in Brussels. I'm the chair of their AI working group, and I speak frequently enough on AI at various conferences and so on. So that's me basically. So tonight we're going to look at a topic which is, I guess, pretty much on everyone's minds. So it's the future AI and the future of work. So we've called it Butcher Baker, Candlestick Maker, AI and the future of work. So this isn't a kind of a crystal ball session where I'm going to say exactly what's going to happen with work in the future. This is more trying to share and explore some of the possible scenarios where it could go, look at the very positive scenario, look at the more negative scenario, and also talk about some of the research and thinking that is going on about this at the moment. And also maybe to try and talk about the near future of work, which probably gets a little less attention than the long term visions of endless productivity or mass joblessness from AI. So, what would the near future look like, which is humans and AI working together rather than AI displacing humans? Okay, so the first thing to talk about, I suppose, is broadly speaking, we can kind of think of work falling into three large areas. So one would be manual work, so all the various kinds of work, whether it's carpentry, engineering, plumbing, high-skilled technical work, whatever it is, broadly speaking, done with the hands. Cognitive obviously then contains all the various professions, what might be called white collar work, anything that's uses the analysis, communication, documentation, the more intellectual kind of work. And then the third kind, right, would be affective. So there's all kinds of professions in there. So counseling, creative sectors, social work, nurses, anything that involves emotional intelligence. So generally speaking, if people think about AI taking away jobs, so previous to November 2022 when ChatGPT came out, so people would have actually said that the manual sector is most at risk from automation and from the development of AI. And traditionally, manual work is the one that would have been automated out of existence or partly automated out of existence. And so automation in that sense is a very old thing, going back to the 40s and the 50s, where in manufacturing or assembly lines, robotics would take the place of manual work. However, obviously, with the development of generative AI, it's actually the white collar workers, the cognitive sector, that is actually seen as more in danger of losing their work or their work changing substantially. So, that being for the obvious reasons that generative AI is able to mimic human thinking, human analysis, and human output and writing to a greater or lesser degree. And also, and then again, with the I suppose the common approach until recent times would be to say that the effective sector, the one on the right, is the least affected by AI and will be the least affected by AI in the future. But again, that's questionable now because of the development of a degree of emotional intelligence as well in generative AI, meaning that so you have things like chatbots that can be your counselor, chatbots that can be your psychiatrist, or chatbots that can be your companion. Um, so the effective sector is not necessarily entirely out of the scope either of the impact of AI. Okay.
Jared, can I interrupt you? As we agreed, I'm going to be
Yeah.
interrupting you.
Yeah.
So when we first started discussing, let's do part two of this conversation, you at the beginning you chose a different topic to talk about, and then we decided you're going to talk about the future of work. What changed? What changed? What was the impetus for you to be pivoting to this? What was there something like a report that you read, or people around you are starting to talk about it more? There's this just something in the air, so to speak.
Yeah, it's because it's a topic I've been thinking about for over a year. So my initial suggestion was more of a kind of an off the cuff thought, and then I actually realized that, well, this area is the one that I spend an awful lot of time thinking about and I'm most interested in. So that's why I chose this topic. And I guess I tried to, being in AI governance, I'm particularly interested in trying to understand how humans and AI are going to work together to make sure that AI is safe and fair. And also, how could humans and AIs understand each other when they look at the world in different ways? But the future seems to depend on the two of them working together. So those are the kind of reasons why this area is particularly interesting to me.
Moving on.
Yeah. Okay, so if you try to think about the near future of work, so what are the things that are coming, let's say, in the next couple of years? So, okay, so the first one is task encroachment, and probably everybody has heard about this phrase, right? So this meaning that rather than replacing us outright, so generative AI or various versions of AI technologies may start to chip away at some of the tasks that we do in our jobs, not necessarily removing our job and us, but just a part of our job. So if you look at different professions, so I just picked lawyers here, right? Because there's probably a lot of lawyers on the call, and I'm a lawyer by training, and so are you, Elena. But so right now, I think there's probably a bit of a misconception about task encroachment. So Jeffrey Funk, who I like to follow on LinkedIn, is very good on all of this. But what he says is that there's probably an excessive fear about the idea that AI would be smart enough to take away our jobs. So if you just look at a lawyer, let's just say a lawyer does maybe 10 or 15 core things. So they analyze law, they interpret law, they apply the law, they talk to clients, they understand case strategy, they have to plan cases, they advocate in court, they negotiate with other lawyers, they do arbitration. And whereas if we look at AI, it may only, for example, take away the initial part where the law is researched and interpreted to some degree. The lawyer then is still going to be the only one who could do the practical application of the law in the real world, because AI doesn't live in the real world. The only one who can interact with clients, the only one who can go to court, the only one who can arbitrate, the only one who can negotiate, and so on. So task encroachment in that sense, I think, is probably not going to be as severe as we would fear in the near future. And you can take a lot of other professions as well. So if you think of finance or accounting, so maybe AI and Copilot and generative AI might take away things like reconciliation or the initial manual work of collating information and data, but it won't take away the interpretive part and the application and explanation of that financial data. So okay, so the next thing then, I think, which is already happening, and I can actually see this happening in my own company, interestingly. And there's research on this. There's a book, I can't think of the author, but effectively what he's saying is that AI is going to be a positive for the jobs market because it's going to democratize things a bit more. And what that means is it'll create a little bit more of a level playing field. So if you look at the two teddies here, so the one on the right is a doctor who spent 10 years in medical school and an awful lot of money to become a doctor. The one on the left is a nurse, but the argument of the book basically is that people like, say, nurses who are kind of intermediate, they're not at the level of a doctor's level of knowledge of medicine. With AI, they could actually close that gap a little and go up on the career ladder a little bit closer to doctors, and you might have these kind of intermediate new professions between a nurse and a doctor. Or you could look at, for example, in the legal context, a legal executive could use AI to close the distance between them and a lawyer. Or in finance, a bookkeeper could use it to close the distance between them and an accountant. But this is kind of like a double-edged sword, right? So it all depends where you are on the career ladder. So if you're the doctor who spent forever and tons of money becoming a doctor, maybe you're not too happy that AI is going to help other people to close the gap on you. So is it democratization of work, or is it leveling things off in an unfair way? And the interesting thing in my own company, where we've deployed generative AI to work with staff, you can actually see that a brand new person is almost as good as a highly experienced person within weeks because of the way generative AI is helping them. So that just maybe creates an interesting future of some conflict. I'm not sure what you think, Elena.
So essentially what you're saying is your experience doesn't matter if, as you mentioned, the person that just came to your company and started working, they have equal access to all the AI tools that your company might use. So pretty much you say some of the cases are there, it's a level playing field. The experienced employee is pretty much,
Yeah, only if the work, so this particular kind of work is very, very defined and very straightforward, rules-driven work. So experience is definitely going to matter an awful lot when the work is more complicated and when there's more going on around the work that only experience could teach you. But just in that kind of very straightforward work with clearly defined tasks, the gap was narrowed extremely quickly, which is a bit weird. So it's not something we're used to in our workplace. So we're obviously used to a scenario where decades and decades of work earns you more kudos, more recognition, maybe better pay, all those things.
yeah.
But if AI starts leveling the playing field, does all of that come into question?
Yeah, that's the interesting part. And a little aside note for just wanted to comment a little on your image right there. Some people will hate on that image and they'll say, okay, AI generated it and it's already biased because you asked for a doctor and a nurse and it's automatically, as I can tell, is a male bear doctor and a female nurse, and people will be like, okay,
That's
bad.
true, actually. Yeah, I have to apologize for that. Actually, yeah.
No. I didn't bring this up for you to apologize. It's just kind of this all of the assumptions the LLMs are consuming. It's
that is the bias. Yeah. Okay, I'll move on. So the next thing about the near-term future of work. So I think one thing which is very interesting is decision making. So there's a lot of thought and research about automated decision making. So will AI replace human decision making? But I think what's possibly a more worrying or a more concerning scenario is really the near-term future is going to be a hybrid decision making. It's going to be AI and humans together trying to come to a decision. But the reality is that, so machine learning, for example, will analyze something in a very different way to the human brain. So if you take the lending example, so using machine learning to augment lending, and then you have a human review part where the loan officer still analyzes the decision to see if it's fair or not, and they'll have the final say so on whether or not to grant the loan. A situation like this, right? So the machine learning came to the decision to not grant a loan based on comparing the person's characteristics to millions of data points and trying to spot objective patterns in the data set, whereas the human being is necessarily going to come into it with a strongly subjective viewpoint based on the characteristics of the customer in front of them. And subjectivity is fine, right? So humans what humans do better than AI is they mix objectivity and subjectivity. They can look at the big factors, but they can also look at the person in front of them and see would it actually be fair to give the person a loan or not. So I guess I don't see an awful lot of literature on this, but Daniel Solov has got some excellent articles on this exact problem. But he says that it's like water and oil, a human decision and a machine learning decision. And there's some other even more critical contexts. So for example, in the US, machine learning is used to give recommendations for judges as to whether or not to grant bail. So you're talking about someone's human liberty being decided. It's also used in parole assessments, and it's also used to recommend sentences to judges. But again, in those situations, machine learning looks at millions of data points. The judge's brain operates very, very differently. So again, I just wonder, I think the big challenge for us, and all companies should be thinking about, is how do we get the two to work together fairly? So I suppose the technical phrase is incommensurable, that the human decision and the machine learning decision may be incommensurable, as in that you couldn't even compare them because they're operating on different cognitive languages. So will we understand each other? So that's what I wonder about the next 5 to 10 years. The next bit then, okay, I think so what we're going to need to do is to get really, really good at figuring out how the human is going to be in the loop. So who's in the driving seat? So I won't go through all of this, but broadly speaking, there's 3 different ways that a human can be in the loop and control AI. So first is human in the loop, and that's where the human is always in the loop at every single stage of the work. Human on the loop is that you only get involved at critical junctures when an alert or a trigger tells you need to get involved. And then human in command is the really critical contexts, like a pilot flying a plane or a doctor remotely operating a robotic arm. So the doctor is always going to be fully in control to step in at any stage if they need to. But I guess all I'm saying here is that we'll need to get really good at figuring out which one of these is appropriate for the situation. And essentially, it's all about the level of risk. So the higher the risk, the more human oversight that's needed. The lower the risk, the more autonomy you can give to the AI. So, so if you think about different situations, so like a human driving a car that has driver assist features in it, where the car is going to do some things on its own, that's probably, well, that's human in the loops. So hopefully the human is paying attention all the time. Okay, so that's just to sort of say that those are the kind of structures that we're going to need to figure out how they will work with human in the loop.
Can I?
Yeah.
Again, just hijack the discussion.
Sure.
So the recent news about those mass firings, and they've been on the mass firing spree since the administration began a month ago. So it's been fun, a lot of fun here. And 3 days ago, they announced they're going to use AI to kind of streamline all those firings. I mean, why bother reading all the responses and the emails and dealing with people so pesky? Let's just use AI and do this. So I'm trying to stay hopeful, but my optimism levels are just about to be depleted at this point. So how do we even talk about, at least in the United States, because in Europe, the EU AI Act has come into force, and obviously it's going to, it addresses use AI in HR and hiring, stuff like that. Those are one of the high risk uses that were actually banned as of February 2nd. But anyway, but when it comes to the US, right, it's pretty much a wild west as it comes to AI regulation. Nobody knows where things gonna go, and things just pretty much have been going only in one direction, right? Deregulation, just let's do whatever we want. No guardrails. Nobody needs that. So human in the loop coming back. How do you ensure there is someone in the loop when the government pretty much does whatever they want?
Yeah, I think aside from the personalities involved in all of that wouldn't give you any trust, right? That the use of AI in this context is going to be right. But if we forget about the personalities, there isn't any precedent or demonstrably fair way of showing how you could use AI to do mass firings in the way that they're suggesting they could do it. So, I mean, without a regulation to tell them exactly what they should and shouldn't be doing, like the AI Act would, insist that they have data quality in place, risk assessment, testing, validation, all kinds of things, assuming it wasn't a banned use case, if it was just high risk. I'm not aware of any blueprint or precedent that they could use to actually make sure that that's done fairly. And the scale of what they're trying to do, if you think of the huge range of different jobs that are done in the US federal government, I mean, I think it's in the millions how many people work for the US federal government. There are departments like that help veterans, departments that do environmental safety. How on earth are they going to come up with algorithms and fair, objective ways of assessing whether or not all those people are doing a good enough job? Um, I think it is doomed, to be quite honest. And also the time frames, they seem to want to do everything yesterday. If they wanted to do it, I would say, another 2 years of planning would be needed to do it fairly and safely.
Yeah, but that was not the objective from the get-go anyway. So why even bother with that?
Yeah,
They are running out of time. They need to do everything in rapid succession. That's my kind of viewpoint. Everything has to be done simultaneously on different levels, so people are
yeah,
distracted. You can't even catch up with the news as far as this goes. So every day is something
no,
new.
no. Well, yeah. I mean, the politics wouldn't inspire trust, but even if they tried to do it, it would need so much more work and planning and testing than it's going to get. Um, okay, will we go on to the positive vision? Cheer everything up for a while.
Please, please.
So there's a chance with AI that we could all look like this in 20 years. All our time is freed up to do more rewarding things. Okay, so we look just through at a few ideas. So I guess this isn't new to AI, right? So as long as technology has been making work more productive and making life easier, I guess the utopian vision or the goal is the idea that one day technology will take away all the drudgery work, all the routine, boring, meaningless work, and then humans will be liberated to do all the kind of meaningful work that makes us truly human, as they say. So I guess the argument here is that if everything goes in the right direction, AI would actually enhance human dignity and flourishing, not diminish it. So then basically we'd be free to do yoga on the beach all day, every day. Um, and again, so this, I'm not sure if there's any Star Trek fans online or not, but there's me anyway, at least. So there's one fan online. One thing I always found interesting about Star Trek, but they never explained it, was that there was no work and there was no need for wages or earnings in the Star Trek future. I always found it an interesting idea. They didn't explain how it would work, but I guess in the most utopian of utopian visions, there would ultimately eventually be some form of a just transition where if AI did do most of the work, we could eventually be freed up for nobler pursuits, such as exploring the universe in the Star Trek case. So why would it be all good? So one argument, okay, is that basically our imaginations are too narrow to see the ways in which AI is going to transform life and productivity and demand, and the ways in which it's going to create new kinds of work for us. So in other words, that there's new, as yet unimagined jobs which will be created because of new consumer demands. So life never stops, people never stop. They always want new things. They want those new things, and new markets are created, and then new jobs are created. The other alternative version is right, is that there won't necessarily be loads of new interesting jobs created, but what will happen is AI will make jobs unnecessary. We won't need to work anymore. And what is happening now is the advocacy for universal basic income that's starting to dovetail now with advocacy for AI. So people are saying that, so the UBI is an old enough idea, but people who are excited about that are very excited by saying that AI is actually going to make it possible. So we won't need to worry about losing our job because AI will make it unnecessary. And there's a very good article there in Forbes if anyone wants to check it, by Bernard Marr, which is the coming together of universal basic income and AI. He's saying that universal basic income is now inevitable.
Yeah, I read about that as well. There's this I would call it a movement where people are arguing.
Yeah.
Okay, so since everybody on the planet sort of contributed to training LLMs and the companies are benefiting from that, why don't we people, as the the main reason those LLMs even exist, why don't we people benefit from that? So yeah, that's basically at least the theory behind that. So why don't the companies get on board and everybody should profit, not only the big tech? But is this even feasible? Because I'm pretty sure companies, and big companies especially, will, you know, they're not going to be they're going to embrace it and just be like, yes, sure, of course. We'll just, we'll share the wealth. You deserved it.
Yeah, I mean, you're like, I don't understand the full economics of it, and I mean, it's these are enormous
It sounds nice.
societal and economic changes in every way. They're also a change to the way nation states work or fund themselves. It's a change to taxation policy, all of those things. So none of this is easy, but what is worrying is that there's very little thought being put into this compared to the amount of thought that's being put into turbocharging the development of the technologies that are going to bring these changes. So a tremendous amount of cooperative effort would need to go into understanding the societal and economic changes that are needed to avoid the worst aspects of this and ensure that we still have fairness and dignity and all the things that we like.
For
Okay,
now.
for now, yeah. So the new as yet unimagined jobs, okay, so what are they? So when we think about a scenario where the jobs can come in 100 years, even if you can't imagine them, if you think of 1900, okay, so there basically was no such thing as a consumer electronics market, so no one could imagine it, nor the jobs that would be created to meet the huge demand for it. So if we fast forward to today, obviously we have phones, televisions, sound systems, drones, laptops, tablets, endless IoT devices, gaming consoles, refrigerators, etc. And there's huge demand for all of these products, creating a need for jobs. And then you have this virtuous circle where technology makes it easier, makes us more productive, makes us to produce these things more cheaply. That creates more demand, creates more jobs, and everyone's happy. If you just think of the figures, so I know these kind of figures mean nothing, they're so big, but in 2023, the global consumer electronics market value stood at 1.03 trillion, and it could apparently be 1.57 trillion by 2029. So the question then is, what new jobs will consumer demand create in another 100 years? So I guess we don't know, but maybe there are totally unknown things. So I guess that's partly true. Whether or not that creates enough jobs to complement the amount of jobs that will be lost is the other question. Okay, so if we look at one sector which to some extent is positively adopting AI and it's changing the way it works, would be in acting. And I mean, again, not everyone is an actor, right? So it's a pretty tiny portion of the whole workforce. And then not everyone is a successful actor. But if we look at these here, so what do Darth Vader, Wallace, and Tom Hanks have in common? So, well, it's all to do with AI, obviously. So if you think of Darth Vader first, so last year James Earl Jones died, and he legally gave consent for his voice to be put into a digital database trained by AI and to be reused. So his voice now is the voice of Darth Vader in the Obi-Wan series that's on, and it will continue on into the future. And he specifically wanted this, so he liked the idea that his voice could continue onwards. The second example then is Wallace from Wallace and Gromit. So this is where an English actor called Peter Sallis used to do his voice for years. He retired in 2010, and they got a new actor called Ben Whitehead to do the voice. But what Ben Whitehead did was he mimicked absolutely perfectly the voice of Peter Sallis. So it is exactly the same. You couldn't tell the difference in any way whatsoever. So if you look at these two scenarios, um, in the Darth Vader situation, so it looks great for the actor. So the actor's voice continues on indefinitely. There's more parts for his voice, so on and so forth. But it also leads to joblessness. So it means you don't need sound engineers anymore. It means you don't need to go into a studio with all the staff who are there. And likewise, in the case of Wallace, so I'm only throwing the question out there, why couldn't you have gotten a human voice artist to simply mimic James Earl Jones' voice, which can be done by people who are very talented? So again, it's obviously going to lead to more loss of work for voice actors. And then in the case of Tom Hanks, that's an interesting one because he has completely embraced the idea of his avatar and his voice being trained, kept, and reused endlessly for movies in the future. He actually said, "Show me the contract where I can sign up, and I will sign up." And I'm not sure if people saw the movie. I didn't see it because it got bad reviews, but it was called Here, which is the film with Tom Hanks and Robin Wright, where they used the footage of both of those actors throughout their career when they were younger, middle-aged, and right up to now. And in the movie, it shows them when they're younger, middle-aged, and growing older and older. So they used machine learning to analyze all of Tom Hanks and Robin Wright's footage from other movies and then put it into this movie and show them as being young. So there's
Yeah.
a couple of interesting things for actors. Did you want to say something, Elena?
Yeah, I wanted to say that I read recently not only obviously the voice actors and the background actors and just like all the
Oh
people in
yeah,
minor roles, they're going to be
yeah,
affected by this as well. But what was
yeah.
interesting that I read, it was in Japan. There's again a lot of people working in the anime industry because it's obviously Japan's greatest export product. This soft power that Japan
Mm-hmm,
yields, right? And
mm-hmm,
the people working in the anime industry, people who translate anime from Japanese to different languages and vice versa, they have been very concerned because AI has been doing a pretty bad job at that. And
ah,
a lot of companies have started to use, obviously everybody wants to automate and let's streamline everything. So whatever comes out is being exported, right? And
mm-hmm,
the
mm-hmm,
sentiment there is the product that goes out, the translation that's done by AI is not top
mm-hmm,
quality
mm-hmm.
product,
Yeah,
meaning the distorted perception, because obviously anyone who's done or translated anything from one language to a different language knows that you can translate a lot of things differently, and if you miss or omit one word, everything changes. So a lot depends on the translation. If it's not accurate, the whole meaning changes. So
yeah,
that's
yeah,
that's
yeah,
that. And a lot of people are, yes, the people are very concerned about their jobs, but they're also concerned about the impact that how the culture impact that it's going to have on the anime industry as a whole if this continues to grow.
yeah. And the other thing that voice artists have said, or people who are impressionists, is that the spaces between the words is what humans understand better. So the AI can take voice and replicate it with different words in different contexts, but the only humans understand the way silence works between words, or pauses, or intonation, or emphasis, and all those kinds of things. Um, but if you think of like the Tom Hanks scenario, it's not just about him being in movies forever after he passes away. it's also right now. So like what actors are thinking about is if you've already made it and you're in this tiny portion of really successful actors, so Tom Hanks could appear in a Tony Award winning play on Broadway, while at the same time his voice is being used for Toy Story 5 and it's being used for 15 adverts in Japan to sell some bizarre
So he
food.
can be more productive, you say?
Exactly, yeah. So what you could end up with is like the middle and the lower tier of actors being pushed out because the ones who've already made it, tiny group of people will just get more and more successful with AI, and it won't actually be good for acting. So they're just very, very weird scenarios that we haven't faced yet. But for sure, if you can get paid hundreds of thousands for your voice to be used in Japan while you get to appear on Broadway and still be a great actor, um, people may be tempted by that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we switched to the doom and gloom for a while.
Finally.
Yeah, the best part. Okay, so the slightly more negative vision. So we want to try and look at how AI could negatively affect the quantity, so the amount of work that's available, but also the quality of the work, so the kinds of work that's left. So there's a court jester who's pretty depressed because there's obviously a robot in the other room entertaining the court. Okay, so if we look at the impact, the quantity of work, the first thing I just wanted to kind of talk about briefly was if we think about the two dystopian visions of the future, and obviously these two books here are to do with a lot more than just work, right? So they're to do with future societies and freedom and what democracy might look like in a technological future. But basically, broadly, there's two kinds of dystopias that you can take your pick from. So in 1984, everybody is doing dreadful work. So technology has taken over, but it's being used for surveillance. There's a big brother totalitarian state, and everybody is absolutely miserable. They are working, but it's low value, drudgery, terrible work. And then the Brave New World scenario is more that nobody really has to work anymore. Society has been controlled by technology to a point where there's no unemployment, there's no crime, nothing can go wrong. So everybody is happy on the face of it, but really miserable. So the Brave New World scenario is the future where kind of aligns with the great line that Karl Popper has, the Austrian philosopher. He says that the best way to create hell on earth is to try to create heaven. So when you try to create a utopia, you end up with dystopia again. So in terms of joblessness, you could kind of look at one scenario is 1984, we'll all be working, but there'll be terrible jobs. Or the second one, no one will be working and we'll be bitterly unhappy because there'll be no meaning. So we just keep the two of those in mind. So the next set of ideas, this is, if anyone's interested, so Daniel Susskind has a very good book on the whole topic. It's called The World Without Work. So two of the things that he says could happen in terms of a fundamental shift in the future is that we'll have frictional and structural technological unemployment. So the frictional is a sort of a halfway house, meaning that AI starts to automate certain professions out of existence. And the friction then in the job market will come because it will be difficult for those people to find alternative work. So it doesn't mean that overall there's less work, but it will just mean that certain people won't be able to reskill into other areas. So, for example, some of the things that have happened in 1950, 1 in 10 men in the US were working in manufacturing, whereas today it's only 1 in 3. So the demand for manufactured goods has not gone down, it has gone up, but the need for humans to meet that demand in work has gone down. So technology has been able to erode away at that. And there's a couple of kinds of frictions you get. So one is the skills mismatch. You don't have the skills to reinvent yourself in a new profession. The other one is the identity mismatch. So you identify fully with the kind of job that you used to do, and you consider other jobs beneath you or just not fit for you. And the third one then is geographical friction. The jobs may exist, but they may be simply in the wrong part of the country or the wrong part of the world for you. Then the structural one, okay, so obviously enough, this is where the frictional stuff goes so far that jobs are actually fully removed. So they're actually, you've been replaced and there isn't a replacement job for you in the job market. So in terms of like normally speaking, the way productivity has moved with technology is that technology has led to more productivity. It has made the pie bigger as such, which has meant more jobs, or it has created whole new pies, as in whole new markets where people can work. But of course, if AI gets better and better at replacing us, then those complementing forces will also be decreased.
But it's, can I
Yep.
just say something?
Hmm.
But is productivity, some argue, is it essentially so much better? More productivity, has it made us more, I don't know, has it made us freer? Do we have more time to reflect and contemplate? I believe that's quite the opposite. And me and you,
Oh
we were
yeah.
talking about it kind of a few months back. Is I read this book where it, I mean, with every technology, with every cycle, that this technology makes us more productive as a society. But it seems to me that we get bogged down even more and deeper into being even more productive, you being more distracted, you were 24/7 online trying to think
Yeah.
of new ways to do more, I don't know, learn more, achieve more, I need more money, more this, more that. So
Yeah. It hasn't.
essentially, is it even worth it?
No, no, it hasn't made us happier, and it won't make us happier. And I would think that technology has actually more enslaved us than liberated us. Well, it has liberated us in huge ways as well, but it is also enslaving us and taking all of our attention. And like you say, it um, it creates more things for you to be concerned with, more things for you to focus on. Um, I guess happiness is a different subject, right? But no, I don't think more productivity is actually really better for the human race. It's better for capitalism. It's better for economics. It's better for the ways in which we create jobs and create wealth and all of that. And yeah, and I kind of touch on that in a few slides as well about what is productivity or what is the meaning of productivity, because I think all of that is going to come into play. Um, and this slide, right, this is just effectively to sort of show how you get to the structural unemployment. So if we think of a London black cabbie, so originally he only did the knowledge test. He had all of the knowledge of the streets of London in his head. Then the sat nav comes along, so it improves his productivity. He can get people to places quicker. He doesn't get lost, let's say. That's all great. But then eventually this moves on and on and on, the friction of it, and you get to full role replacement if this actually becomes a driverless car. So that's a very simple example, right? But that's the trajectory that we're on at the moment, whenever driverless cars may or may not become common. And one thing you can end up with then is this excluded middle. Okay, so that in the future, so what's in the middle there is all the white collar workers who have been squashed out of existence. You might end up with a tiny proportion of the owners of capital. So this would be the owners of the 4 or 5 giant technology companies. And what you'd be left with, there would be jobs, but they'd only be the ones that are unsuited to automation. They'd be very low level, not meaningful or enjoyable, and humans would be left with the choice of those poor jobs. So again, I'm not saying that this is what's going to happen, but these are potential outcomes. The other thing, which is a bit dispiriting, I guess, is that you can have economic growth, you can have a surge in demand, but that won't necessarily lead to more human jobs either. So if you think again historically, uh, for example, the British agricultural industry has since 1860, so about 150 years or so, its output has grown by 6 times, but the amount of people working in it has gone down from 27% to about 1.8% of the UK workforce. So in other words, the output is hugely more, and it's meeting a hugely increased demand, but it hasn't led to more human jobs because technology was able to do an awful lot of that. So again, it's just to say that I suppose straightforwardly equating economic growth with more jobs isn't necessarily true if the AI can actually do those new jobs that get created. Um, Okay, I'll go on to the quality of work then. So I think one thing which is interesting, and there's a lot of papers on this, which is that will AI and the way AI thinks, so the way algorithms think in a highly mathematical, logical, process-driven way, will this come to dominate how we actually view work, so that we'll see work less as a human activity and more as something which is completely reducible to measurable metrics. So this is where we get into the meaning of productivity. So is productivity just this endless race towards how many things did you do last week? So it's a bit like the Department of Doge and Elon Musk's wonderful letters. So asking FBI agents, can you tell me what 5 things you did last week? So it's sort of a comical level of trying to reduce everything to measurable productivity. Um, so the danger is, right, so that a human would be assessed in their work in the way in which a machine works. So that man would become modeled on the machine, so that our managers would insist, why aren't you as productive as a machine, or why aren't you productive in the way that the machine is? That it would just be all about output, output, output. But obviously you get into the silly world of confusing uh, productivity with activity. Um, so Monty Python, so I don't have a video link here, but this is an excellent video link if anyone wants to check it on YouTube. It just satirizing the world of looking at everything in terms of measurable productivity. So this is the Royal Society for putting things on top of other things, and they meet every year in this really serious room to talk about all the things that they put on top of each other compared to last year. And you'll see in the clip that one of the members didn't put any things on top of each other last year, and he says, because I thought the whole thing was rather silly. So have a look at that clip, but it's a very good satire of the emphasis on productivity being the meaning of work. Then the other potential negative effect, and I think you shared some papers on this, Elena, on LinkedIn, which is
Mhm.
the possible degeneration of human decision making and human intellectual capacities because of an over reliance on generative AI. And so this is where we simply become more lazy. We think less, we analyze less because generative AI is doing it for us. And literally our neurological processing power may start to decline ultimately over a long enough period if that continues. And then you have quality of decision making declining because we get used to AI making the decisions. And then I'm just speculating, if agentic AI is as powerful as it could be, does that mean that our ability to engage in more complex multi-step reasoning could also diminish, and things like long-term strategic thinking decline? And do we become dangerously dependent on AI?
You
Um,
know what I keep coming back to, diving deeper in this, because obviously, and you've been thinking about that for a long time, and so have I. You cannot but think about how it's going to affect us all, this technology, on the social level, on the human level, professional
mhm,
level.
mhm.
And I keep coming back to the movie Wall-E, because
Yeah, yeah.
that's, at this point in time, that looks like a very, very, you know good good scenario for all of us, because
Mhm,
at this
mhm.
rate, if the pace of technology accelerates, and you know people keep some people just keep embracing it without giving it any thought, other people just straight out reject it without as well giving it any thought. Either way is bad. But
Yeah,
what I keep thinking is, just, won't we all turn into this? I mean, not we, obviously, you and I will just be like that awesome forever, but other people will, right?
everyone
So,
else. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
is it just, that's just right out scary to me.
Uh, yeah, it is. And more use of generative AI means less reading of books as well. And reading is still the foundation stone of learning, or the way that we have always learned and always educated, until we come up with a new way of learning and educating people. So I have absolutely zero intention of becoming dependent on AI in any kind of cognitive way that affects my own abilities. That's for certain anyway. And that brings us nicely onto the next slide. So forget about AGI. So what about ADIHT? and I've just copyrighted this today. So it's artificial decline in human intelligence. So basically, will we end up like Sporky on the right from Toy Story 4, I think it is.
4?
4, yeah. Yeah. So I have children in the house, so I know all the characters. Um, so I think this is a definite danger. And if we can see it happening already, what will it be like for children who are born into it, unless we adapt education to make sure that the core elements of learning are still there, like analysis, understanding, interpretation, communication, and all of that. Okay, and another kind of related negative effect of relying on AI is what's called automation complacency. And if we look at the case study of driverless cars and also semi-driverless cars, so where there's auto assist. So what's more dangerous than AI? So it's AI and humans trying to work together. So at the moment, the Federal Transport Agency is investigating over 1,000 Tesla crashes, although that may change given that Musk is right in the middle of tearing some of those agencies apart at the moment. Let's say before 4 weeks ago, it was investigating over 1,000 Tesla crashes, and most of these actually weren't the driverless cars; they were the semi-driverless ones, where auto assist helps the driver. And there were 44 fatalities in those crashes as well. And I read a very good piece on this. So it's basically talking about the dangers of so the way humans respond to things being done for them is like a sedative. So automation is like a sedative. So once the kettle is boiling, I start looking at my phone, I start looking out the window. So a human has two responses when something is being done for them. They either zone out or they start doing something else. And obviously both of those are potentially lethal if you happen to be behind the wheel of a car. And so it's speculated that the auto assist features of driving have this potentially lethal aspect in them because we're kind of like children. We think the AI is on it. I'll just check how many likes my last post on LinkedIn got, or do whatever it is that I'll do because I think I've got 30 seconds now of free time. And the interesting thing with the driverless cars as well, the research in Eindhoven, in the University in Eindhoven, has argued that a driverless car, so it's equipped with all of these cameras, and it takes in thousands of pieces of data as it drives along. It scans everything all around it on the street, whereas a human's brain is far more advanced because a human driver, you're able to take in all the information that's going on around you, but you're able to phase out most of it and only focus on the most important things in front of you. So a child is on a bike in front of me. I'm very conscious of that, but I've phased out the woman who's inside the shop across the road because there's no way of me hurting her with the car. So, like, it's a false impression if we think that AI is better than us because it is calculating millions of data points, because we have the superpower of being able to do the same but phase out the irrelevant ones. Okay, so the next slide. So you're going to be thinking, what on earth is he thinking of talking about here? This is actually an article you brought my attention to, Elena, which is a Walter Benjamin essay on the gift of boredom. And I'm just going to read a quote again from the book that you referred me to, which was The Burnout Society. So in other words, what Benjamin is getting at is that doing nothing, boredom, which is a uniquely human thing, can actually lead to big breakthroughs compared to a sort of a permanently logical, rational thought process like AI might have. So what he says is, we owe the cultural achievements of humanity, which include philosophy, to deep contemplative attention. Culture presumes an environment in which deep attention is possible, but increasingly such immersive reflection is being displaced by an entirely different form of attention, hyperattention. And this is a rash change of focus between different tasks, sources of information, and processes, which is a scattered mode of awareness. And it also has a low tolerance for boredom, so it does not admit the profound idleness that benefits the creative process. And this is what Walter Benjamin calls deep boredom, a dream bird that hatches the egg of experience. So in other words, there's so much more to human beings that AI can't do. So we have this gift of doing nothing, of contemplating, of accessing intuition, creativity. which leads to huge breakthroughs that the kind of scattered multitasking busy bee mentality will never get to. So again, it's to sort of say that there are extremely important human aspects of work and productivity that we have to allow for and remember. And boredom and doing nothing is where they spring from. Okay, so we'll finish with a few odd slides or different. So another Monty Python reference. So now for something completely different. So this one is just, again, research has focused to some degree on if work changes and if less people work, there's going to be less income tax. Nations, states are going to have to figure out how they're going to plug that income tax hole, which is going to arise. So tax is very creative. So tax has evolved throughout history. So I mean, in medieval times, people were taxed if they had roofs on their castle. So I'm sure taxation will continue and come up with new ways of taxing us. But this is just to point out that, again, research has said that there is a looming tax black hole coming, which governments are going to have to worry about.
A robot tax.
It could be a robot tax. Yeah, maybe if you use AI, you'll have to pay an AI tax in your company if it means that there's less employees paying income tax. Who knows? It's
South Korea actually, they implemented robot tax in a very narrow area.
okay.
But a few years back, I think it was 2017 or something like that, ancient times in AI times. But yeah, I mean, they're the most technically equipped country in the world, so it would make sense that they started it. But yeah,
That's
it's interesting how it's
that
gonna all work out.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to think about as well is that there's a little miss. Whoops. So will companies actually undermine their own markets? So if the 5 or 6 huge companies that are pushing AI forward now, if this ultimately leads to mass joblessness, then we don't have wealth to purchase their services, to buy their products. We don't have wealth to buy the things that their adverts show us. So in other words, like, is this just racing towards a future where there won't be the wealth to support consumerism, to support demand, to support economics? And are those companies undermining their own markets if they don't actually join the effort to create new jobs in the future as they directly also remove jobs? This one then I think we've actually already discussed, right? So what about education? So if the future of work is going to change, it does make sense that the future of education should change. And actually interesting, in Ireland, our AI Advisory Council has just released a paper on the future of education. And that was led by Alan Smeaton, who's actually been on this show as well in the past. And he is a big advocate of using generative AI constructively in learning, so that you would shift from instructivist to constructivist learning. So instructivist learning would be, broadly speaking, the lecturer tells you everything and you just put it into your brain, whereas constructivist learning would be that you engage more with the material. And the argument there is, right, is that generative AI can be used creatively in that kind of constructivist learning. But I suppose my point is that the core elements of learning still need to be there. We still need our students leaving college being able to analyze, reason, look at different viewpoints, communicate things clearly, even if the way they learn changes. And then the last word is going to be for Sigmund Freud. So really, what does it all come down to? So what is the meaning of work? So if we're going to work or not in the future, we need to understand what is the meaning of work. And he has a good quote from Civilization and its Discontents, where he says, love and work are the cornerstones of our humanness. Love and work and love, that's all there is. So presumably we don't have time to go into love in the next 2 minutes, but if we just look at the work aspect of it, I think this is fascinating, because really the real question is, what is the meaning of work? Do we dislike work? Is it just something that we do because we need to have money in the bank at the end of the week? Or, as in a lot of cases, is it actually a core part of how we get meaning from our lives? So for all the people who get an awful lot of meaning out of their work, I don't think they want to see work going away. Some imagined paradise like in Brave New World turns into a nightmare if we can't find meaning in other things. So we can't hang around the house in our slippers, because that's not going to make us happy either. So I think what is the meaning of work, and keeping our focus on that, is going to be crucial as we navigate the next few decades if work does really actually change. So I personally don't see lying on the beach every day as meaningful. If someone took work away, I would simply be trying to find projects elsewhere and starting all over again. Um, okay, so we've reached the end. So if anybody wants to hook up with me, I'm on LinkedIn, and that is it.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jared. And as always, I need to say that our next episode will be on March 15th. I'm not going to say who's going to be our next speaker. It's a big, big, big secret. But thank you so much. It was amazing as always to have you on, Jared, and thank you
Thanks.
for
It's great
taking the
fun.
time. Yeah, and I'm pretty sure we'll have part 3. We just have to think about the topic, but the topics are pretty much are all out there. You just
They
grab
are.
any topic at this point that we can have like an hour long discussion on
I think
that.
so. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank
Thanks
you
very
so
much.
much. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
I love the slides, and I was kind of expecting, because your slides are usually very, very interesting.
It's just a chance to have fun, really. Yeah.
I know you never miss that. Thank you so much, Jared, once again.
Thanks. Bye.